Good morning and happy Saturday. This is a religious Saturday for some people. I'm not going to speak for Eric or for Ian that are with me today, but this particular off season, this particular spring has been absolutely buck wild. Let's just go through a few things that have happened this week alone and just in football in general. We've got the NFL is announcing a brand new kickoff. Spring practice is in full swing for the University of Texas. It's my dad's birthday today. The University of Minnesota is moving to a pay-per-view practice schedule.
Our pets' heads are falling off!
Everything is happening in such a crazy way that we are trying to bring it all together and synthesize it in today's roundtable. So let's do that. Let's start with spring ball. This is the topic on everybody's front of mind right now, as we've got some new toys at the University of Texas that we're going to get to see execute their skill. So Eric, I'd love to talk to you a little bit. What are you seeing? What are you hearing in the spring game? It sounds like everything is very much on schedule and we're seeing the development that we anticipated.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a lot of excitement around the whole team. Quarterback, wide receivers, running back, offensive line. The offense is right on pace, I would say. The defense has a little bit of catching up to do with the offense, but I think that's just a testament to the amount of experience that's on the offensive side of the ball. There's no real concerns about defense. They're just having to go up against really good offensive players. Third-year Quinn Ewers is taking the next step after he took a big step the previous offseason. We're hearing all the right things about him and his confidence and, playing the position, becoming much more second nature. He's not thinking as much. I think sometimes last year that's where the passing game bogged down a little bit. He's starting to hit the deep ball more consistently. A lot of the new additions have really lived up to the hype. Just at wide receiver alone, we hear about Isaiah Bond and Ryan Wingo just about every practice. Wingo had a 30-yard reverse touchdown in live period yesterday. Bond had a touchdown as well. Those guys are hard to cover. Very talented, very talented. We can probably do a whole show on where Texas is better or worse by position over the previous year where they made the playoffs. And at most positions, I would posit that they're better. Defense, for every time we hear about Isaiah Bond on defense, we hear about Trey Moore, the edge that they got from UTSA. The pass rush in general has got a lot more speed to it. It's a lot more burst with Trey Moore and the addition of Colin Simmons. Linebacker, they're very excited about where they're at with that position. There's plenty of leadership there and plenty of talent. David Benda's having a good camp. Anthony Hill, of course, is a superstar in the making. Maurice Blackwell is a solid player. They're good there. And then that secondary, man, they have a lot of depth. They've got 3 stars that they could play with Jalen Gilbo and Austin Jordan, and of course Janae Barron. Safety is a lot better than last year. They've elevated the talent level in that room. There's still good leadership in Michael Taff and Andrew Makuba. And then you've got young studs like Derek Williams and Jelani McDonald taking the next step. And we're hearing about corner improvement too. They're much more in tune with the defense. They're not standing around watching the quarterback as much, watching plays unfold in front of them. They're definitely a lot more comfortable or getting more comfortable in zone coverage. So, man, everybody says it's just nothing but Kool-Aid, but when you're the number 3 or number 2 team in the country, you're going to hear a lot of good things. You're going to hear a lot more positive than negative for sure.
One of the things that we should talk about a little bit is that depth in that secondary, because one of the things that you've been writing about all offseason is the potential move to single high coverage. And I would love to know, obviously, we're going to talk a little bit more at the end of the show about some of the potential rule changes and how we can coach those types of things. But with that depth that Texas is coming into the season with, what do you see in terms of schematically us starting to alter towards something like a single high?
Well, yeah, single high would be, they just have a lot of guys that can turn and run with people. So if you wanted to go to more man coverage and you have, like Eric was saying, like 3 stars that you like 3 nickels that can line up on a slot and chase them down the field, that's really helpful. When you have reliable safeties that can execute multiple alignments, that's helpful. I actually wrote this week that Johnny Nansen back at Arizona was frequently using a package on like 1st and 10 against some teams where they would play with 3 defensive linemen, 1 linebacker, and 7 defensive backs. It's called a dollar package. Nickel, dime, then it just jumps to dollar. 7 defensive backs on 1st and 10. Pretty wild. And they just moved them all over the place. Offenses didn't know what was going on. They could play man coverage with all those guys and just swarm teams. You'd think we'll just bully this team. They have all these 195-pound guys on the field. Well, then there'd just be one unblocked in the backfield. just like running the running back down from behind, coming from God knows where. So I mean, there's a lot of different directions they could go this offseason because of the depth in the secondary in particular, and we're just kind of waiting to see how exactly it'll unfold.
Yeah, right now they're running a lot of different coverages. They don't seem to be focused on any one in particular. I know that they're doing a lot of different things in cover 3 the other day. Obviously, cover 3 allows them to have another extra run defender. And I think, with the loss of the defensive tackles, I think that's something that they're really trying to figure out, making sure they can stop the run first and foremost. But they're so varied on defense with their coverages that it's going to be interesting to see. And we'll get more information on that this spring. We might not get an exact idea until August. Right now, they're doing kind of they're covering all their bases and getting the younger players caught up. They've got a lot of young players, a lot of new players in the secondary. They're trying to get up to speed. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see because they do run so many different coverages.
One of the things that you wrote about earlier this week, Eric, was the idea that we lost Ford. So we think, okay, now we're going to lose some quality maybe at linebacker, which we certainly have. But your source is telling us that might be one of the great strengths of the defense. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, well, I mean, it was my opinion before entering the spring, but now, I'm talking to some people that feel the same way. They feel like the linebacker core that they'll have next year is going to be one of the best in the country. The same source that told me last August he felt that Texas had the best defensive line in the country, and I was hesitant to share that, given how some of those guys hadn't materialized on the field before.
Right.
Well, he was right about that, and I think he's going to end up being right about this group too, because David Benda has played a lot, but that last year was his first prolonged snaps, and he's still coming, he's still improving, he's still getting more comfortable on defense, and so and Anthony Hill. I think Anthony Hill is, if you go back to the old school, the way that the NFL used to prioritize linebacker, Anthony Hill would be a top 10 draft pick back in the old days. So he's an absolute stud, and Maurice Blackwell's good. He's put on some good weight. He runs. He's physical. So those first 3 are really good. They're trying to see who else can join them, but they love that first 3. And then they've been playing Trey Moore at Sam when they're in base some, and that's that has potential to be devastating. And Leonga Lafau is making strides. One question mark they have is Kendrick Blackshear. He probably needs to lose a little weight. He's up to about 260 pounds, and that's just too much to play in space. So
the big dude.
He does not look like a normal football player because he's not a defensive tackle, but he doesn't look like a linebacker either. So, but yeah, they love the first 3, and I think they like the depth behind them, but that's still kind of shaking out.
I tell you, both Anthony Hill and Trey Moore are the sorts of dudes that Belichick would always draft on the Patriots and then play at like 3 different inside or outside linebacker positions because they're big, they're smart, and they can pass rush, or they can. Those 2 guys, I really wonder. I'm curious to see what all they do with Moore, because I kind of think he's going to end up being like a Mike in the NFL. And obviously Texas doesn't want to do that necessarily because he's probably one of the best pass rushers on the team. But those 2 guys are really, really flexible, and those 2 in particular, I think, could be standouts.
Yeah, Moore earned a lot of praise with the call I had yesterday about his football IQ. So we know he's got everything else. He's got that first step you need. He's got good balance as a pass rusher. He's hard-nosed. He's physical, but they were raving about his football IQ. So I think to what Ian's saying is they could do some things with him that we haven't seen them use out of that position yet.
One of the fun things I think for any Texas fan to watch this year is the evolution with Ant Hill in a proper middle linebacker position with the athleticism that he has. He very much had a, pull the trigger and go scheme last year, just letting him absolutely hunt things down, and bringing in the cerebral side of things this year is going to be a really fun thing to watch, especially in those early games. So if you're watching the game and we're blowing teams out, which is God willing, that's the case, but watch some Anthony Hill and see how he's developing in that, because it is going to be one of the stories of this year. One of the other stories that just dropped this week is the idea. And again, this is a proposal, so we don't have anything exactly set in stone yet, but it's the concept of allowing more analysts to do coaching, on-field coaching, bringing in more training for the kids, which makes a lot of sense if you think about it, because they are limited. They're highly regulated in how much time they're allowed to spend with the athletes. And there's also a limited number of people you can have on the field. So that limits reps, specifically for those players that you really want to start developing lower down in the depth chart. Now, we don't have exact numbers yet on how many coaches are going to be allowed on a team, or or what that even means from a coaching perspective. We know, for example, that they're not going to change the recruiting aspect of it, in the sense that they're going to keep 11 off, or rather in the fields, recruiting people available. So it's not to say that, just because they bring in an analyst, they can bring in 15 or 16 other recruiting people.
Right.
This is something that we've talked about. And Eric, before this even broadcast, you went on to say that virtually every major rule change that we've had recently, certainly within the last few years, has really been an advantage for Texas.
Yeah.
And I would love for you to share that, because specifically with our coordinators, well, our one coordinator, PK, let's be honest, our other coordinators are head coach. So specifically with PK, how does this affect him? What is the advantage we have here, knowing that maybe we don't have to, put PK in a helicopter?
Yeah, well, they've got the budget to really take advantage of this. We saw the value of it just this past year. Look at Jeff Choate. He went to Nevada and took 3 of the assistant behind the scene coaches with him. That tells you, I think Jeff Choate has pretty good football IQ. That means that they're hiring some good people in those positions. They provide a lot of value. But I think the most interesting thing to me probably is the recruiting element of it. PK's got a blind spot in recruiting. He's not the greatest relationship builder. That doesn't mean he's awkward and all that. It just means that that's not his personality. He's not a salesman. And that's what a lot of recruiting is. There's a lot of these coaches that are college coaches because of their recruiting, not because of their coaching ability. There are high school coaches all over the country that are good enough coaches to coach in college. There's no doubt about it. But very few have that salesman element that I don't know. Terry Joseph is a hell of a recruiter. Jeff Banks is a hell of a recruiter. Those guys can relate to anybody, small school, big city school, doesn't matter. And so they would probably pull PK off the trail immediately, I would think, because he still has value as a recruiter on campus. That's where he does his best recruiting, is breaking down tape, going over the chalkboard, that sort of thing. I wonder if they would change Brandon Harris's role. Would they want Brandon Harris on the road? I think that would make a lot of sense. But yeah, they would bring in some more dynamic personalities, more dynamic recruiters that are also quality coaches that they would try to put on the road. But for the most part, I don't know that they're outside of PK. I think they've got some good recruiters. It just remains to be seen on Kenny Baker and Johnny Nance and his reputation precedes him. But it's just another one of those rules, like all the new portal rules, all the new class counter rules and recruiting class size and all that. All these new rules have benefited Texas, and then if this passes, it'll just be another one.
One of the things that is happening in this program, and we're seeing this, certainly the most recent one that I've noticed is at Texas Tech, where they've ostensibly brought in a GM, and they brought in a GM department that is doing all the evals, or at least 90% of the evals, and then they're just sending the coaches out to get those kids. And Charlie and I have talked about this, Coach Williams and I have talked about this on another video, about the role of the analysts and how much they bring in just in terms of recruiting knowledge. But do you see an expansion even further into that type of more, Ian was talking about, this professional structure with a major program like college, where it is getting further and further away from the coordinators and the position coaches doing the lion's share of the evals and recruiting?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've probably gotten past that already. They had a Bobby Merritt, who they just lost to Rice, was basically in charge of their college scouting, which 5 years ago that would have been an unfathomable position to even to begin with. Why are you scouting college? And they lost Billy Glasscock to Ole Miss, who was the GM. Now they bumped Brandon Harris up and brought in some other guys, but yeah, it's already heading that direction. The coaches always have to have a big say in it because it's their players and they're selecting for their schemes. But as far as the initial investigation of these recruits, the background checks, funneling up the tape of guys that make the cut, it saves the coaches a whole lot of time. But the coaches are always going to be heavily involved, just because that you want to, like Bill Parcells says, if you want me to cook, you got to let me go pick out the ingredients.
Sure. Well, and keeping again with these rule changes, I want to talk about the headsets a little bit. We've got a comment here from our friend Bill Bowden. He's asking about, how do we see this? And this is more of a question for you, Ian. How do we see? We've talked about how the headset's really going to benefit the relationship between Sark and Quinn. What do you see? How do you see that affecting the defensive side of the game?
Well, it could be potentially easier to bring a blitz without somebody knowing it's coming. just because you can't steal signals. Like we usually talk in college about stealing the signals of the offense, right? But like when the Patriots got in trouble, they were stealing defensive signals so they could, sniff out blitzes and call the perfectly timed screen and stuff like that. I don't know. I don't know if it's going to have a huge impact beyond that. Like on-field communication is already very important with defenders. Like they need to be able to communicate with each other, different checks and things, so they can't necessarily rely on the sideline. And you usually have one guy on your team that can make some of those checks and tell guys like, hey, no, you got to go. Like the coach on the field, right? There's so many times in the last decade, Texas has had a coach on the field type guy at safety or something. And people have been like, well, this guy's too slow. Why can't we get him off the field? And it's like, well, he's really good at this communication aspect that without that, the speed won't matter because you're going to be turning receivers loose all over the place and not covering them at all. Having headset communication and having a guy like that receive the signals, I mean, I just think it's going to be kind of more of the same.
Do you think with the headsets, Pete would go back to the booth?
No, I think the reason he was on the field had to do with communicating with guys on the sideline, like adjustments that needed to be made, like in between possessions. Eric can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it had a lot to do with like feeling the confidence levels of the players on the sideline and being able to sense where the team was and if they were about to fall apart, or if they needed just like an adjustment face to face to stop an offensive breakthrough from running them over or something like that. I think offensively, to me, there's much more obvious implications for offense than for defense.
I like it for defense, especially if you're going to play a linebacker for the first year calling the defense, right? It's gonna help him out tremendously, I would think. So, I would expect that Anthony Hill has one of them, one of the communication headsets, and probably David Benda as well. So, I think it's going to give Anthony Hill even more confidence to go out there. I think to me that's the biggest benefit is helping along a young player.
I believe Sark did say though that they were considering giving the radio to the nickel. So
yeah, we're going with a little bit of our inside information on this one.
Okay.
And because Barron's going back and forth between corner and nickel.
Yeah.
And they've got 3 different nickels that they like right now. And I don't know how they're going to play all of them, but like a source said last night, Terry Joseph's going to have some tough decisions to make in September. But with Jahdae Barron going back and forth, that was part of the deal for him to come back, was that, he didn't make any demands and they didn't make any promises, but they were in agreement that he should at least get a look at corner. Obviously, he's a quality corner. I know he had some trouble late in the year last year, but so that would seem to be seem to point in the direction of having the communication on with the linebackers.
Moving on to our spring game, we have a big announcement to make. We are going to be doing a live stream. You're going to see a live one of these at Posse East in Austin, Texas, just after the spring game. So if you can come join us, spring games are starting to change throughout the country. And I want to talk a little bit about what's happening at the University of Minnesota. The NIL has become so influential in these mid-tier programs that what PJ Fleck and his department is doing over there is getting rid of the spring game altogether and having what is ostensibly a pay-per-view practice. So if you are a contributor to the NIL group over there, which is called Dinkytown, I did not make that up. I looked it up this morning. You have the opportunity to go see a special exclusive practice. And this is what PJ had to say about this. He says, we want to encourage and create more people being a part of Dinkytown athletes as best as we possibly can. And knowing this and understanding this, I know that this is new news to both you and Ian, and this is personal information. But Eric, when was the last time you went to Dinkytown?
Oh man, is that a euphemism for what I think it is?
We're just trying to keep it straight and narrow here.
Oh man, yeah, that's TMI. Still holding it down at 45 though. Yeah, that's just a little too lowbrow for Texas. Even the name of that collective is, Texas would never come within 100 miles of something like that. But yeah, I don't. I don't want that pay-per-view access. You know, I like practices to be as private as possible. It puts more priority on our information. Obviously, if they're just replacing the spring game that anybody can go to, I guess that's fine to raise money. Texas doesn't need to do stuff like that to raise money. They're having a giant concert in May with Brooks and Dunn and Ryan Bingham. That's going to raise a lot of money. They're having a big golf weekend that same weekend, celebrity tournament or whatever. And I think they're going to raise $3-4 million off of that weekend alone, maybe even more. I could be low on that. So I don't think that's anything that Texas really needs to look at. But if that's what they need to do to stay competitive, then I applaud it because, you know, like we were talking about on a different topic, just, you know, the people are going to find a way, you know,
Yep.
on the economics of it. People are going to find a way. There's, you know, they're incentivized to go out and think outside of the box. And so, you know, if that's what they need to do, then good for them. But I don't think we'll see that at ET.
LC, do you have to be a contributor to Dinkytown athletes in order to have?
Unfortunately, admission into Dinkytown is not free. Dinkytown costs money to get into. So if you want to be a member, which I'm assuming you get some sort of lapel pin for Dinkytown, then you are allowed to go to this specific Dinkytown practice. So
I'm imagining like they could be collecting some money from all their Big Ten rivals. They might want to send somebody there.
It could be. I don't know the legality of that. I'm sure that if you're, like I said, if you're willing to pay to be a part of Dinkytown, you should be able to go to the actual practice.
They're going to come out running the wing tee to throw everybody off.
Well, you know, PJ loves to row that boat, so you have no idea what's going to happen over there. Before we close out here, again, spring game, April 20th, we are going to be broadcasting live after that game at Posse East, and we want you to check that out. I gave Eric the opportunity to answer this question, and I know that you have 4 kids, Ian, but would you like to tell the folks about your Dinkytown experience?
I'm no.